Hello, this is the Jared Presley experience, not the Jimi Hendrix experience, and it's not Joe Rogan. This is the first podcast I'm doing, and it might be the last one. We'll see. Our first guest is Brooke Forrest. She's a friend of mine I've known for a couple years now. She has a podcast on Verge FM called Pop Culture Perspective. It really goes into depth on different movie suggestions, etc. I'll let her tell you more about it. Thanks again, Brooke.
Hi there. I have a radio show at a. It's currently a radio show that is monthly on a community station based in Columbus called Verge, and my show is called Pop Culture Prescription. It's been on for about a year now, which is exciting. That I'm going to go into my second season, basically starting this month. But the show kind of started off as a way of me just getting to talk about movies in a way that felt beneficial to people. The show started during lockdown, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kept feeling like, well, we're all stuck inside and people seem to be like aching for entertainment. More than ever, I saw people kind of talk about, oh, I've watched everything on streaming. I've watched everything that's good. And that's simply not true. You will never run out of things to watch or listen to. It is truly a problem that I think about all the time, is that, our lifespans are not long enough to delve into all the great stuff that's out there and all this great stuff that's going to happen after we die. Like, it's a bummer.
Yeah.
And there's plenty out there. And not that I've seen it all, but I guess I've seen some more than some, your average person. And I figured it might just be nice to be able to kind of be like, hey, not everybody needs to do these master lists of movies you need to watch before you die. Some of those are worth it. Some of those are not.
Yeah.
But there's going to be movies that if it's your kind of thing and you didn't know that this existed, it's on themes that you love, but you didn't know that this movie that wasn't hugely popular might just be your favorite movie in the world. And that's kind of, where the idea started from and what it mostly is.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is filtering through all that. I mean, there's so much out there, especially now with the internet, etc. It's almost oversaturated. I mean, it's just filtering out to, the gems, sort of say. I mean, that's why like your show and others are really helpful in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've noticed people enjoy a lot now with streaming, because streaming, I think more than anything, has let people have their hands on way more materials than they ever thought they would. It's always really exciting to me when I see some of the people I know that are a little bit younger than me discover movies that I loved as a kid that weren't that popular, but it just happened to be streaming on Netflix and they thought it looked neat and they gave it a shot and they loved it. And that's always really exciting for me because I don't think, I think a lot of movies come out and they don't do well, so people just think they're bad. And that's so not true. That is absolutely not true at all. I mean, some of the best music isn't really music that's huge.
Oh, for sure.
It's the stuff that got buried. It's the artists that didn't, do so hot. And their stuff just was like lying in a basement and somebody found it and went, this is amazing. And then it found another life later on. And I think that's a lot of the same for movies and television. And I think it's really nice to kind of give them another life to go, okay, there's stuff out there you haven't seen. And let me kind of take out the guesswork for you. Because there's a lot of stuff that you can watch being like, that sounds amazing. And it's terrible.
Yeah.
I do that all the time. I'm like, I love that cast. How have I never seen this? I'm going to love this. And you watch it and you're like, oh, this is why I've never heard of it. So it is a hit or miss game going in blind. But the thing I've noticed a lot about streaming becoming kind of the main way people watch things now is a lot of people like the curation part of it. They like, hey, this is a theme that I'm into. Let me watch all of these.
Yes. On that, though, I was going to ask, do you feel like different streaming services are better at curating than others? Do you know what I mean? Like some of them may be better as far as curating to you than others. And if so, if there's one you highly recommend.
Oh, absolutely. I think each streaming, like of the major streaming services, have their pros and cons. Some of the major ones, it is insane how bad the interface is. Like, how much money this company probably has, and it is the most horrible thing to try to find movies in. But one of the ones that succeed, I think, in very specific themes and curation is the Criterion Channel. I mean, I know that's like a lazy film fan's answer, but It's one of the few that really highlights some things that I would love to see highlighted. You know, not only interesting themes, but like really cool directors, actors that I think deserve some more love. And in a more general sense, I'm also very fond of TCM. Turner Classic Movie has always been one of my favorites, and their streaming service isn't perfect interface wise, but the channel has always done a phenomenal job of doing like really interesting themed programming. So they will do like stars of the month or theme of the month or director of the month, writer of the month, whatever. And it also comes with this sort of like beginner and ending of information about this person or about this theme. And I think that's a lot of fun for people. And it kind of lets you watch a lot of interesting things you might not have given a shot to.
Well, for sure. And I know the channel, but I didn't realize they had a streaming service. Do you know offhand how much per month each of those would be cost?
I think like most streaming services, a lot of them are like $10 a month. I am lucky that I get to use TCM through one of my parents' cable providers. TCM usually I think falls under your cable provider more than being able to just buy them as a service, unfortunately, because I think, you know, I don't have cable. A lot of people I know in my age bracket don't really have cable anymore.
I don't either. So
yeah, unless it comes with like your apartment complex or something. Most people I know don't spring for cable anymore. And the funny thing is, I sometimes miss it. When I go home and I visit either one of my parents who have it, I enjoy getting to like get that, the curation of cable telling me what is on at this hour and what movies I could like choose between or shows I can choose between versus infinite numbers. So there's definitely, I mean, that's how I watched so many interesting things as a kid, was strictly cable. I didn't have the internet until I went to college. So it was a lot of just blind rentals at the Eagle Video rental store that doesn't exist anymore, and lots of cable options, because sometimes they pick some neat stuff to put on air
and sometimes they don't. Again, that's I'm just looking through it, but because I'm around the same age and I grew up in the same way, it's just with cable, I mean, there was a lot, but there's a lot less. Where now, what I was saying before, it's almost so can be overwhelming for someone really trying to find some good media to digest.
Oh, absolutely. Like when I flip around and I look on any of the ones that I haven't looked at in a while. So like I'll go on Netflix every so often, and it's really hard to just see what's there. Like their algorithm or whatever just wants to show me the same like dozen or so things or stuff that I've already seen before. And I know there's good stuff on there that I don't realize is there until I'm searching for something else. And this happens to show up in like that search screen. And I'm like, this is on here, and they're not offering this to me. They're not showing me this on the front page. I love this. I want to see this.
Yeah. But I was just thinking back when you're talking about video stores, like that was just a time where you like a lot of times without the internet, I mean, you kind of just had to look at the cover, and if they had like a credits like on the thing, like sometimes they had like Cisco and Ebert 2 thumbs up. I mean, there's times that you really limited, like you kind of had to judge it by its cover or by word of mouth. Because
absolutely,
yeah, it's way before the time of Rotten Tomatoes or other critics.
It's
okay. Go ahead.
Like video store, that was my dream job as a kid. Not like dream career, but like I thought I absolutely should work at a video store. I want to be that person that gets to have like a row on a shelf being like, these are what Brooke recommends. I love them. They're wonderful places, and you can get a lot of cool discovery there. I found some of my favorite movies just as like that looks kind of neat, or, you know, it's available today kind of, you know, movie rental, because I used to rent movies every single weekend. And it was a delight. And I never really took their recommendations. I wanted to hunt on my own. So it's really ironic how much I love recommending to people, but I don't really take that many recommendations. I will sometimes, depending on what they are. But my dad was absolutely one of those people that the woman that worked at the video store would recommend him things, and he loved it. Like he rented so many of her recommendations and loved them.
Oh, it's really nice. I mean, I know there's still video stores, but it's a novelty now. And maybe in the future, it'll kind of pop up like record stores, kind of more where they can kind of a renaissance. I mean, there's still something about that atmosphere. And I kind of feel like what you're talking about with your father and store clerk, where now, like with streaming, you don't have that human interaction. And I feel like to a certain degree, no matter how good the algorithm is, there's something to be said about like word of mouth, and like people taste, like being able, like at least with you and different podcasts, you hear a human being. You can hear the emotion and algorithm. I mean, it's adjustments, but you can't really go and ask why,
Oh yeah, I'm with you. And it's like Rotten Tomatoes, I understand how like aggregates and data is interesting to people, but it's flawed. It's inherently flawed. You're going to have a lot of people who don't like weird movies, who accidentally watched one and are like mad about it, or who don't like certain themes in a movie. Therefore, this is the worst movie they've ever seen. And you're going to have like, all of these very personal reasons why a person might not like something. And then they're going to give it a terrible rating. And I didn't get to work at a video store, but I did briefly work at a movie theater. And, this was like 10 years ago, but it was baffling to me how many times I'd be like working at the box office and like a group of, younger folks would come in, like early 20s, late teens, and they didn't come in with an idea of what to watch. They had no idea what to watch. And then instead of asking anybody, they would check Rotten Tomatoes. What has the best score on Rotten Tomatoes? And I was like, that's not always the best indicator of a movie you're going to enjoy.
Yeah, you should at least go and like look at some of the credits, like actually look at the articles and see why they say what they did. I've seen it sometimes, even like for positive ones. I don't think it's a positive review. They counted as one, but it might be just more of middle of the road. But it's not a positive review.
I think some of my favorite movies are like rotten or whatever. Like people hated them. They hated them when they came out, or they didn't get it, or they don't, a lot of film critics, as much as that is sort of a field that I get very close to a lot of the time. A lot of them come in with this, and I think this is the struggle of any art critic. You want to preserve this like mentality that you had this like very impressive taste. And I think it's usually like a very highbrow taste. So a lot of these folks are very afraid of embracing truly weird movies that aren't like A24 approved weird movies. And they're not into things that are, maybe not as polished or perfect as they'd like. And, it's the same thing you see when you see the movies that are nominated for Oscars every year. They're not the best movies that came out that year typically. They're just the ones that I think are the most like understood by critics. They're the most friendly to a larger group of people of this is what a good movie is, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, the Oscars, I mean, it's by a group of people. It's an opinion. I mean, I'm not saying I hope, I mean, a lot of times it's an educated opinion, but it's still, an opinion. And that's a whole other, I mean, this movie's that absolutely should have won the Oscar that didn't. But that's a whole other discussion.
It's the same as like, a legitimate political election. Not everybody votes, so it's not everybody's opinion.
Yeah.
And the people that do, a lot of them vote and they're not informed. The amount of Oscar voters that didn't even watch the movies that were nominated or only watched the ones they thought they would like they're getting free screeners of these amazing films and they're not even bothering to watch all of them and make an actual like educated vote.
Yeah. I mean, that's scary though. I mean, you'd feel like that should be disqualified, anyone who actually hasn't sat down and watched all of the movies in full.
Oh, absolutely. And it's frustrating because you see things win that you're like, they're just picking this to pick this. And you always see sort of like the anonymous ballot information after the fact or right around when the Oscars come out. And you see a lot of them never watch the animated movies, which is why it's always a lock if you're doing an Oscar poll to pick like whatever the biggest Disney movie was that year. That's what's going to win because that's the only one that any of them are aware of. They probably didn't even watch it.
And with Disney, it's not leaving another topic. With Disney, they just have the financial backing basically to promote like with animated movies, where there's so many that, may have like there's some animated movies that have a lot lower budget, but like I would enjoy more. Is this with Disney? I'm trying to find a way to put it. It's kind of like the McDonald's of the entertainment industry almost. Yeah, I know that sounds bad, but I mean, there's no real other way I can describe it. I mean, especially nowadays, I would say.
And it's tricky because it's like Disney has produced some amazing animated movies. It has done some things that we all love and appreciate. I it's not all bad. I
No.
mean, you look at the origin of Disney, and you have Walt Disney, who is a businessman, and Ub Iwerks, who is an amazing creative artist. And you need both to make that happen. Like he's sort of like, and it happens in all creative fields. Like you've got your Steve Jobs and your Steve Wozniak. One of them actually knows how to make a computer. The other is a really good businessman. But we only know the name of the good businessman, which always bums me out.
I was about to say, most people don't even know who Iwerks is. Like, if you mention that.
Oh, I know. Yeah. But I always love to. Like, it's incredibly probably pretentious and annoying when I do. But like, Ub is so cool. Like, he had made amazing work. He is the father of Mickey Mouse. Really.
Oh, for sure.
And nobody really talks about that because we think of Walt. We think of Walt Disney as this, and he is an innovator in terms of business. He's Ray Kroc. He didn't come up with the idea, but man, he made it implode.
And, I guess what I was saying, this was more way after Walt's passing, was more like, I guess, within the last 5 years, where it's more. Oh, no, I agree.
Yeah. Everybody who's taken the helm after him is in that same mind,
Yeah.
All of the businessmen who run Disney are not creatives. They're just good businessmen.
And even since you left the theater, my brother used to work at the theater, me and him. This was about 17, 18 years ago. He would take me to see movies on the midnight showing. And just from then to now, and I was saying with Disney, a lot of movies nowadays in the theaters are only like Disney movies or remakes of mid-budget movies, where the scenes changed. And even since you left the theater, I don't know if you had any general comments. You did mention on your podcast, because I requested it, but if you could, in general, if you had any general thoughts on that with the future of cinema, because I feel like that's kind of dying. Like, there is something about going to a theater and seeing a movie with a crowd of people.
I'm with you. And it's so, to touch on what you initially talked about, that a lot of things in theaters used to be a little more versatile.
Yes.
You'd get some art movies, you'd get some like mid-budget, interesting, stories. You'd get a lot less of that now. A lot less of them are even just being produced and released by major studios, because they don't do that anymore. And I do think that is a crime. It started to really get bad around the time I was at the theater. It was a real bummer working there, because I thought, great, free movies. Out of the year that I was there was really only like 3 or 4 things that came out that I genuinely liked and wanted to see. And we only had them for about a week. Which sucks, because you've got these art films that need a little bit of time to gain an audience, and they get a week in the theater because the theater's not going to make enough money on them.
That's
but
crazy.
They will absolutely have 3 theaters in the tiny building that are for Taken 2 or whatever big sequel was out at that time, and it sucked. But I got it. I got that those places need to make enough money. That's why I'm so thrilled art house theaters still exist and are doing well, especially through all of this, because there's an audience for that.
There is.
They're just harder to fill a giant theater sometimes, but that audience exists and they want to see these movies on the big screen, not just at home. But a lot of people, you hear the whole Marvel anger, especially from a lot of the cinematic heroes, a lot of Scorsese fans, and I love Scorsese, and I think he's not off base with Marvel stuff, especially coming from his shoes. It's got to be really depressing.
Yeah, and Coppola said the same thing. Probably harsher, but they both have. And I feel like a lot of people who are criticizing Scorsese hasn't actually read what he says. He's never said they weren't movies. That's not what offended people, and it's not. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, he doesn't want theaters and his movies to all be of that genre and all of that of maker film.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the issue I take with them. I'm not a Marvel movie person. I think a comic book movie should be an hour and a half. They should not be prestige 3-hour films. But whatever people want to see, they have an audience. They're making a lot of money. A studio would be foolish to drop the ball right now and be like, oh, I don't want to make money.
Yeah.
I get why they do it. I get why they exist. And the market exists. I'm just not the market. But and I'm happy for people that this brings them genuine joy. It's the same as I liked Star Wars a lot as a kid. Obviously, over time, those feelings are not as strong as they were when I was a child, when you keep adding more and more Star Wars things.
Yes.
But I totally get why that franchise can mean the world to somebody, and that's important to them. And it means that's great. If there are Marvel people like that, that's wonderful. I'm happy for them. But I think studios really need to start looking at the future, that bubble is going to burst eventually. You cannot do, 2, 3, 4 decades of the same shtick.
No. And I feel like it's already sizzling down a bit.
A little bit, because you're oversaturating the market. Like, I hate getting into economics because I hate economics. But I, when you look at the past of cinema, there have always been waves where they go, this is what's hot right now, so this is what we're making. But that always changes after a while. You lose the audience, you've made too many, you start making them and they're redundant, or they're not even that well made anymore because you're just cranking them out. And that bubble's going to burst. I don't know what the next thing is going to be. But I hope it's a little like, I'm yearning for a second wave of like independent, interesting cinema. I don't see it happening right away, but like you look at the 70s.
Oh, yes.
That is the greatest era of American independent cinema. And it happened after, this grand era of like these huge productions that they put a lot of money into, and like, grand musicals and epics and all these things that were like doing really hot. But some of them were kind of, very safe and very formulaic.
Some of them are really great, like Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, there's some of them that were really good, but some of them, I get what you mean. But then in the 70s, you get your Spielberg, Scorsese's, Lucas's, Coppola's, etc. But I feel like as far as filmmakers, it's kind of flipped to where they have less control now, especially with Marvel movies. From what I've read, like a director really has no say. They're just there to roll the camera.
I could definitely see that, especially for the major studios. Yeah. Sometimes certain people thrive in that environment. A lot of the best creatives, unfortunately, don't. But I really hope that like more studios come from this, like more people sort of branch off from making, their fortune and, this current wave of really easy to like, I'm going to throw a bunch of money at this thing that people like, and then they'll go to it and I'll make my money. I want to see people start opening more, A24 is nice, but I want there to be more than just that. And those movies do well. Like, it's really, it's very funny to me when people try to talk to me about, it's sweet. Like, I'm not being mean to them, but like when people try to talk to me about movie things, they're like, oh, you like interesting movies? Have you ever heard of A24? And I was like, yeah, obviously it's huge. It's not this underground thing that people think it is. But the fact that enough people are interested and want to be part of like an interesting, independent sort of film wave is enough to make me optimistic that that might happen again. Maybe not with like a studio that currently exists, but like I think a lot of people are starting to realize that there's a desire for that. There is, and there's a desire for these strange movies, things that are a little more, art film.
What I'll say, what I'll say more than anything else, if anyone, like for anyone listening, put your money into these movies. If you want this to have more of these type of movies, I mean, definitely put your money towards these movies, because it's always going to be kind of a struggle with the capitalism and art. So it's these two things. And with film's expensive to make. Typically, films are expensive. They don't always have to be ultra expensive, but still, this money that has to be invested. So for investors, if they see more and more people putting money into these type of films, I feel like with studios, they'll definitely hopefully they'll put more money into them.
Oh, I agree completely. And I mean, I've talked about this on my radio show as well. And just anytime anybody will let me, not just the idea of independent film, but film made by people that are not just straight white guys. That is still the standard. That is still the people that can like have a bomb in the theater and still get like 7 more movies, no problem. But like, it's still really hard for female directors and non-white directors to get consistent work. And that's a crime, because so much of the best things in the last decade in terms of film were movies made by Black folks and women and queer folks, people who are like finally getting to tell their own stories. Those movies find an audience because that audience has been desperate since the beginning of time for films that actually include them.
For sure. And something, go ahead. What I was going to say along with that, foreign films as well. There's so many people I've known who've never watched a foreign film, and you really get an insight, especially if you watch a few from a certain area, just, kind of the art and culture.
Oh, absolutely.
And and again, with that, I highly, highly suggest subtitles. Sometimes you can get a dub, but it's not. I feel like when you.
I don't get subtitle hate. I love subtitles in English speaking films. I want to know what's being said.
Oh yeah.
Because I also think that so many films mix poorly. Same with TV shows, and I don't need every sound effect and like music break to be like 10 times louder than the dialogue. That's a little frustrating, and I love subtitles. When I'm at home, I just put them on for everything. I don't know.
Oh, I do too. What I mean with that is, like, I like hearing the actor, like, from, like, if it's a like film from Asia, from Japan, or like an Italian film, you hear from them. So not that that's not good dubbers. It's just, I like how authentic it is when you hear that, or if it's a Spanish film, someone speaking that language.
I'm with you completely. And I think it's also one of those things that it does feel, not to be that person, but very lazy American to be like, no, everybody needs to speak English in everything I watch, which is just so silly. The rest of the world has had our media forever, and not all of it's going to be dubbed. So it's nice to hear what other people sound like and let them be themselves, and you can just read. Now, certain subtitles are like harder to find or poorly done. I get that. But beyond that, give it a shot in its actual language, and then just, if the reading is a little too fast for you, I'm so sorry, but there's plenty of foreign films with limited dialogue. So you can kind of dip your toes in that way.
But again, as what you're talking about with the like Black filmmakers, women, etc., what have you, again, put your money where your mouth is. Like I was telling people who are listening to this, if you really want to support those people, definitely don't download illegally the movie. Like, really go out and buy the movie in a theater or whatever. Because more than anything, that's going to show studios, hey, maybe there is an audience for this, and investors will invest in this.
I always aim to, like, if I'm just going to randomly go to the theater, if it's not something that is very much like a theater experience movie, and most of the movies that I like are not really that.
Yeah.
Some are, but most of them are not. And if I'm just going to go see a random movie in the theaters, I will absolutely, like, 9 times out of 10, pick the one that is by a woman or by a non-white person or by somebody who's queer, because I would so much rather give them money. Like, no offense to Steven Spielberg, he doesn't need my money. He'll get to make movies till he's dead. And I'm glad, but he doesn't need my money.
Well, it would have to be something you really want to see by him to go and pay money.
Yeah, especially as of late. Like, I'd maybe give a shot to the West Side Story remake just because I've heard good things.
I've heard it's better than the original, which really... that's really high praise.
There's no way that it is. But
I don't believe it. I don't believe that either. But I've heard that from several folks. Like,
I'm thrilled that he did the right thing and actually cast like brown folks for the Puerto Rican roles. As much as I love the original, it's very jarring to see like Natalie Wood, in like makeup. That it's just not great. But yeah, everything else, I still haven't seen it. I want to see it. I want to give it a fair shake. But yeah, it's not going to usurp the throne of the original, I don't think.
If I had to guess, I would say it's really, really good. It's not as good as the original, but I would still say for remakes, it's probably one of the better remakes out there that's actually worth seeing, I would say. I'll probably see it at some point. I'll have it in the link in the description as far as how to hear the podcast. If you could, the website is Verge.
I believe it's verge.fm. Like I said, they're a community radio station based out of Columbus, and my radio show is monthly, it's nice because I don't think people probably need, I don't think they could keep up with the amount of movies and TV that I recommend per episode. I go a little dense sometimes, but that's just because, some are not going to be for everybody. I sort of say it in the sense of like, take what you will from what I've just said. Nobody needs to watch every single thing that I've seen. Some of it I would actually recommend not watching, but if there's something that I mentioned that sounds like something you'd like to see, then please do.
Well, I'll have it in the description, and there's also the SoundCloud page where they have the old episodes, which is nice. Before we end, I was going to mention to the audience, I first got in contact with Brooke. Believe it or not, we were talking with COVID. I was supposed to have a show at a venue in Kent called The Dome, and I was so excited for it. Then it was in March of 2020. Then COVID hit, and that was so depressing.
Oh yes,
if you remember.
Yeah.
And I did get it rescheduled, and this place.
Oh geez, you're gonna make me do dome talk now.
No, I'll talk. No, it's a really intriguing place. I've took photos of the place. The building's cool. I've traveled around the country playing shows. It's not the weirdest venue I ever played at. It's just this place is really like right next to a suburb, and I mean it's like right next. It's like if it was in like downtown Kent, I feel like it would do like 100 times better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that little stretch of road was enough to make it my job incredibly hard. Like I would bust my butt trying to get people to come to shows, and they're like, well, it's so far. I'm like, you could literally walk there from downtown, but all right. Sure, drive an hour to Cleveland to go see every show.
Well, and again, like I guess it kind of was what we were talking about. You just need the right people in there. You would just need the right people really doing cool stuff, because people will travel if it's something really cool.
Not always. That's the annoying thing, is there were amazing shows that happened there, really cool stuff. People like things that people like that they go to, you know, when it's in Akron or when it's in Cleveland, but you know, right down the road in Kent, it was a hard sell. Which is frustrating because really cool stuff would happen there on a regular basis. And I still feel very lucky that I saw like a lot of really cool things that like nobody else saw. And, you know, it's a bummer when that happens, but it was a really nice reminder that like how much amazing stuff happens in rooms with like almost no people. I've seen cooler things at dead shows there, like completely empty shows there, than I've seen at packed houses elsewhere.
Oh yeah, sometimes the most intimate settings, definitely. I didn't regret playing there. I mean, I enjoyed playing there. It was just an odd place. The
venue definitely had its downsides, but I wasn't in control of most of that stuff. I usually warned people when I was booking them, like, this place, I'm giving you a show, you get this space. I am guaranteeing nothing else. There's really nothing else that I can guarantee for you. You're probably not going to make a killing. You're probably not going to have the world's biggest crowd, but it's a date. It's a show.
I had a good time.
Sometimes that's enough. I think most bands that are like, especially working their way up, know that that's just kind of a thing that happens. You know, I meant no ill will toward any band. I didn't guarantee any of them the biggest payday of their lives at all. But, you know, it's a show. And that's sometimes all you need.
For sure. No, I don't regret playing there. I enjoyed it. It's you'd have to see it for the audience. It was just it's a unique place.
It's a cool building. Like I don't think the people that were running it. I think the venue has since closed because of COVID. And it's frustrating, but also I get it. Like I don't think that the folks that were running it had enough like money and know-how to really kind of give it what it needed. Like that place needs a bit of a facelift, and it could be something really cool.
Maybe it'll happen. Maybe.
I hope so, because I don't think that like I would love that building to like have something interesting in it and like actually be able to be like used for good.
Yeah.
You know, not just nefarious things.
Yes.
But I don't know. It was frustrating because that's the whole reason I took the job there was I was running the campus radio station in Kent.
Oh, yes.
The college station, Black Squirrel Radio. I ran that for about 2.5 years. And I loved it. I loved my job. I loved doing that work. But when I was no longer a student, it wasn't really a thing I could keep doing. And I kind of have limited ability to get around because I don't drive. So I was like, what else can I do in this town to try to help with music? Like, this is all I've been doing for like the past 2 years. We don't have live shows like we used to. There are like 1 or 2, maybe like 3 or 4 places you can really play in Kent, and 2 are kind of accessible to normal bands.
Well, especially with COVID, like Cincinnati's really been hit hard. Like I even now, and it's, believe it or not, like I can't even believe like this March will be 2 years. It really like I had shows canceled, like, and I won't mention it in this podcast, but there's several events that happen, so I just really don't play out live anymore. Maybe again someday, but there's still some things that I'm doing in relation to those events. But well, I'm going to end it on that note. But thank you, Brooke. Let me say this then. Is there anything else that for the audience you want to add, or anything in regards to radio or film that any specific recommendations?
Yeah. So you had actually mentioned this to me before we got started talking about like a handful of my favorite films, and that's a little tricky because I think a lot of my favorite films are my favorites, not only because they're good movies, but very much because they do something for me specifically. So it's always tricky to be like, this is what everybody should watch because I love it. That's not true at all. But my only recommendation really for folks when I'm talking about movies and music is give a shot to things that you never thought to give a shot to. It is shocking to me how many people I talk to that think movies from like the 80s are too old for them to watch, or that they'll never watch a black and white movie in their life unless it was like some, art film that came out like a year ago that they just happened to make black and white. And that's a shame. You are missing out on some of the best work that has ever been made because you are not going back far enough, or you're too afraid to try a very, interesting genre or a movie from a different country. So just give a shot to some stuff you weren't sure about. There's a lot of really amazing stuff out there that you are, not letting into your life because it's too old or you have to read subtitles. And that is just not a way to do it. You're really missing out.
Totally. Thanks again, Brooke. I appreciate it. As I mentioned, this is the first and hopefully not last podcast of mine. Thank you for your time, Brooke, and best of luck to you.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks again. That was Brooke Forrest. You can catch her on Verge FM. I'll have a link in the description. Thank you, everyone. This was the Jared Presley Experience.